welcome to the Giraffe Social Media Podcast. It's what social media managers are talking about. I'm Chloe Belchamber, and on today's episode, I'm direct messaging Montreal-based entrepreneur and agency owner David Morneau. We'll be discussing how to use micro-influencers to gather market insights at scale and the influencer marketing strategies David has used to help his clients. But first, let me introduce you to today's guest. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks for having me, Chloe. Really a pleasure to be here.
No worries. I mean, how is your morning? You are based in Montreal, so we're on opposite ends of the day at the moment. How are things?
Yeah, morning's going pretty well. I'm headed out right after this, going on vacation, long weekend, going to see some family. So yeah, long drive ahead. So this is my final kind of quote-unquote task of the day, I guess.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be your last, and hopefully this sends you off into a great weekend ahead.
Yeah, let's hope so, yeah.
Well, to kick off today's episode, David, why don't you tell us how you're connecting brands and micro-influencers over at your agency, InBeat?
Sure thing. So in a nutshell, right, we are an agency that specializes in micro-influencer marketing. The way we connect brands with micro-influencers is pretty straightforward. We have a network of influencers that we've collaborated with in the past. We can tap into that if a brand comes to us and they're like, hey, we do hair care. We want influencers between the age of 25 to 34 with different hair types and so forth. We can look into our database and kind of identify the influencers that fit the bill. If we don't have the influencers there, then, we can go do some outreach, find the influencers, onboard them. And every time we work with influencers, we get them in front of the client, make sure the client is approving of these influencers. And after that, we orchestrate the collaboration. So it's really about just matching the brand with the right influencer. And that's how we kind of do that connection on a more tactical level, I guess.
Absolutely. And we are going to be talking a little bit about using micro-influencers to gather market insights today. So Before we get into that, I want to know, how does InBeat define micro-influencers? Because depending on who you ask, it varies.
Yeah, we're playing with that so much. Right now, our current definition is 5K to 25K. We were at 10K to 25K. We look at it kind of like in a budget bracket. And then, one of the distinctive feature we kind of look for in micro-influencers is that they don't have an agent per se, right? So this definition can extend to 100K on Instagram. Typically, a client comes to us for micro-influencers. They're looking for anywhere from 10K to 25K. Some of them are defining it as 25K to 100K on Instagram, and TikTok is we just bumped that up essentially to 100K to 250K being a micro-influencer, because TikTok is just giving people so much more followers than Instagram is. So naturally, we have to kind of adjust for that.
Massively. Well, when I was, taking a look at your services, I thought one really cool thing that you guys are doing are using influencers to help brands conduct market research before they run their campaign itself. So can you talk us through that process? It's not something I've personally heard of before.
Yeah, so the whole process is you can gather kind of qualitative data and you can gather quantitative data. And then, we survey our influencers, ask them like, hey, if you were marketing director at XYZ brand, how would you change the packaging experience? How would you change the wording? What would you buy? What are some brands that you absolutely love? What are the next things we should sell, and so forth, right? Kind of gather market insights from there. Additionally, you could run a focus group, right? So get some influencers and say, hey, let's do a focus group, get a kind of focus group coordinator, and then, they go with a group of influencers and then they chat through specific focus group questions. So there's many ways we can use that. The premise for us to use micro-influencers as a way to gather market insights is really that these people have a pulse on social media, and we want to tap into that. They're spending a lot of time on social media. They know what's hot. They know what's trending. They're there. They're spending tons of time, and we want to tap into that understanding to help our clients kind of get the cutting edge of what's going on in social media. So that's really how we view it. But you could package it anyway. Surveys, one-on-one interviews and so forth. Sky is the limit.
We'll jump into why brands should ideally be doing this in a second, but I want to know, how receptive are influencers to this sort of surveying, as you said? Like, are they passionate about sharing their insights of the industry? Like, how do you collect this feedback?
It's mixed, right? So when we onboard influencers, especially the ones we already have a relationship with, it's easy for us to kind of add questions in the onboarding process because we have a relationship with them. So we could add a couple questions there, gather some insights that we can share with the client afterwards. If we're paying them for a collaboration, typically they're super enthusiastic about like giving us their insights about like, okay, well, how was your experience and so forth, and what they would do. People like to be involved in these things, especially. And then, so let me do a parenthesis here. Just on a tangent, is just like, this really depends on your brand, right? Like if you have a brand that resonates and people love, it's so easy to get influencers involved and excited about what you're doing. But if your brand is not too good, then it's something you should work on first thing. So everything relies on brand, because I'm saying this like it's easy. It is easy if you have a good brand. That's really like the premise on what it's built, because the influencer and the brand, it's a bilateral relationship. They promote you, but they're building their brand as well, right? Because they're a micro influencer, so naturally they're looking to be exposed to brand deals and look cool to other brands to get more brand deals. So they're happy to work with brands that look great, but they're not as happy to work with brands that don't look great. So that's something worth mentioning.
Yeah.
We can close that, and then we can go to the essentially to the influencers are super receptive, and then of course when we run a focus group, right, and then we have a survey question, what we do is that we'll pay them for their time there. And what's tricky about that is just coordinating everyone and making sure that they're available at the right time and so forth. But yeah, that's how we run it.
And is this part of your service kind of mandatory? Do you do it for every client before you begin a campaign, or are they coming to you with this?
So I know you work social media too, so you're probably like well aware of the different client types. Some clients come to us and they're ready, like they've got everything like in place, everything is figured out, the positioning is figured out, everything is perfect, they know what they're doing, they know that they want to scale it, and they're referring to us to help them scale it. The other type of client is like, hey, I just want to do this, but they have no clue how to approach it, so they come to us. In that case, we definitely recommend gathering some market insights, not necessarily a focus group, but more, like we can use surveys to gather very specific questions about, okay, well, what, like, we can ask for like, what are your fears with X product? And, what made you buy XYZ product and so forth, right? Just to get that kind of insight in their own words. And we really recommend to do that with clients that don't have as deep of an understanding of how they want to approach this.
Definitely.
But it's not mandatory. Yeah, it isn't.
No way. So how important do you think it is then for brands to utilize influencers? Because as you said, they've got their fingers on the pulse. They know social media. They know pop culture. So what's the best way to kind of use this to your advantage?
Depends on the brand, again, right? But typically, if you're looking to create high quality content that you can repurpose, micro influencers are an amazing way to go. If you have a TikTok friendly product that you can display in like a TikTok context and it gets tons of views, then influencer is the way to go in that sense. If it really depends. We kind of calculate it on a return on investment basis. Is like, okay, well, what are you looking for? Like, what is market insights worth for you? What is content worth for you? What are the sales worth for you? And then after that, are you looking to build an ambassador program with these influencers and so forth, right? And we look at that, and then that's kind of like how we measure the ROI on these influencers. I'm not sure I answered the question, but I kind of walked around it.
No,
so
it's perfect. So let's talk about some strategies that you've used in the past to help your clients scale their influencer marketing efforts. Is there a magic number when it comes to how many influencers you want to work with on each campaign?
There's no magic number, to be honest. The way we go at it is we run a pilot with every client that we onboard. So it's pilot to a monthly retainer. That's how we work. And the pilot is always going to be between 20 and 30 collaborations. Sometimes we'll go lower, a bit lower to 15. But that's where we land with our pilots. The reason is that we want to get an understanding of, okay, what are the different personas? What are the platforms? Is this going to work on TikTok? Is this going to work on Instagram? Are we doing testimonial type of content? Are we doing featured display type of content? Are we doing lifestyle type of content, right? What are we doing? And then after that, once you've got that nailed down of like, okay, here's our platform, here's our positioning, here's our target market that it's working really well on, then, you can scale, right, to 100, 1,000 influencers. It doesn't matter at that point. Once you've got the numbers down and you've got the return on investment that you're expecting, then you can ramp it up and just make it happen.
And just to jump back to our market research topic really quickly, I guess, how do you tie in that initial information that you've gathered from your influencers and tie that into the campaign messaging? Does it ever change after you've done that market research?
That's a great question. I mean, so we worked with an underwear company, right? And we had like one of the personas that we were targeting was like, okay, let's go after wives, right? And then we were like, our persona was like, okay, wife with like, men not wearing, like, just not changing their boxers, right? And we pulled tons of direct testimonials from like, hey, tell us your boxer story, right? That was the kind of positioning that we did there. Is like, hey, tell us your boxer story. We want to hear it. And there was such amazing content that came out of that, and then we could repurpose that into social media content, into paid ads, right? Of course, ask your influencers to do so, right? Just don't go and use what they said. It's like, but essentially, it's really powerful stuff in that sense that you can just. Because sometimes as marketers, right, we get stuck into our paradigm, our way of saying things, our way of positioning things, and we're just like narrow-minded in that sense. And, getting the voice of someone else and a man describing their boxer story in that scenario was very different from a woman. And then it allows us to get kind of insights from every type of people. And then all of a sudden we can use that content. And then a fitness enthusiast is not going to have the same kind of use case for a good pair of boxers, rather, and it just kind of, and then you get their words, how are they saying it? And that's essentially like the ideal scenario is them saying it like they would say it at the barbecue with friends, right? That's really what we want. Like, that's like the ideal scenario, because those words, using that into your copywriting, your social media positioning afterwards is amazing. Another thing we did at some point was, COVID hit, and then, it was like, okay, well, I think we were 6 months into COVID, right? It's like, okay, let's ask the influencers, like, what are they binging, right, on Netflix, and let's create some content, social media content around that, because like if you know what your audience is resonating with at this moment, then it's just easy to create content around that, meme type content and so forth. So different ways of leveraging these people that are spending so much time on social media, and the biggest unlock is really to so you guys do social media management, but you get stuck in like a rut of like, we don't have content, we don't know what to post, like we're stuck, we're like narrow-minded, we don't know what to do new. And then it's so refreshing to get people bombarding you with new content ideas, new content period, and new visuals, and just reusing that in your calendar. So
that's such, like, so many uses for this market research, right? Because maybe you think you're getting insight to your target demographic, but you're also, coming up with these new content ideas based on what you're being told, as well as them having that influencer content in turn. So really, really awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely like we view it as a way to decentralize your creative efforts, right? Just to give it to a bunch of people. And that goes beyond driving sales, right? And of course, driving sales is a very valid objective. And in a lot of campaigns we run, it's like the sole objective. And, there's brands that are brand driven. Some brands are much more attribution driven.
Definitely. Right, well, moving back into kind of the optimization of your campaign, what about small businesses who have tighter budgets? We know it's great to pay our influencers, we really should be doing it, but how can you still maximize an influencer marketing campaign when you can only work with a handful of influencers at a time as opposed to a wide scale?
So like, scratch the idea of like, my opinion has evolved heavily on this front, but essentially I'd scratch the idea completely of working with influencers, and I'd just look in your client base and think of every one of them as an influencer. Your clients are essentially talking about your brand, and if they're talking about your brand, they're driving sales. And if they can do that for you, then you can unlock their potential, right? And that's how we kind of view it. So if you're like on a tighter budget, and let's define tighter budget, let's make it $2,000, right? And I know for some brands that might be a lot, but like it would be hard, to operate under that. I think, we don't operate in those budgets. So, but what I would do is essentially I would probably I would look into my Instagram followers, who's commenting on our stuff, who's liking our posts, try to find people there that are just engaged with you already, and then allocate that budget to enabling these creators to create content for you, share your stuff. And even if they have 500 followers, don't forget that, their feed, if you get in their feed is untapped by paid collaboration. And that's huge. Like, that's huge to have someone who has never been, who has never done who has never shouted out a product, having them shout you out, that's enormous in terms of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when most people think about influencer marketing, they imagine a brand sending an influencer their product and then having that influencer posted on their feed for all of their followers to see. But you've been helping brands scale their ad campaigns and marketing through content creation alone, right?
Yep, exactly. Exactly, because once you get your paid media team, or if you're doing paid media or you have an agency, they're craving for new content to test different ad variations. So if you can pipeline tons of new content to them, and then your creative team there can just chop it, repurpose it, and then create ad variations with it. Like if you end up being able to test 50 new visuals every month, that's some powerful stuff.
And I think maybe some, small business owners may be afraid, like they kind of want the sole purpose of their influencer marketing to be that, their product is reaching new eyes because the influencer is sharing that content. But what are the benefits of, specifically working with influencers purely for them to provide you content that you can use in-house as opposed to them sharing it with their followers?
Yeah, so we've played with that a lot, and because like we have creators where we just ask them like, hey, we just want to create the content, but truth be told, like they usually want to post it to their social media afterwards if they resonate with your brand. So it's there's like kind of a disconnect there between like what we like, because we're like, hey, we just want the content. They're like, yeah, but can I post it? And we get that quite a lot. So it's like, well, of course you can post it, right? But we just want the content, but like. So we're kind of stepping away from that on our side, in the sense that we're asking the influencers to just like create the content and then do whatever they want with it. But if you're, for instance, right, if you're a food ingredient and you're asking a cooking influencer to create a recipe with your food, right, then at that point it doesn't make sense for the influencer not to share it to their social media. They spent a lot of time creating that. If you're a fashion brand and you're shipping them like an amazing jacket or whatnot, it doesn't make sense for them not to share the new picture that they took with the jacket to their feed, right? Because it's good content, and they need content just as much as the brand needs content. So
definitely. Yeah. I mean, is that almost a loophole? Because my next question was, is this an effective cost-saving technique? Like, is there a difference in price when it comes to influencers creating that content for a brand's internal use compared to them posting that content on their own platform?
Yeah, that could definitely be a negotiation point. I would definitely include that. Like, when we negotiate, we have different kind of points that we negotiate on. Is like, okay, we can that's definitely a good negotiation point. Like, look, we just want the content. Like, let's say they say a price and you offer less, but you say we just want the content, right? And then that can be a good negotiation point. I would use it that way, definitely.
Interesting. Moving on, something I've been loving about TikTok is that brands can actually boost influencer content on the influencer's page to reach a wider audience. And I think that is such a cool feature. So I want to know, how does authentic native content like influencer posts outperform your traditional ad?
Oh, it blows it out of the water, right? So here's the thing. Here's what we're testing right now, and Ben, our paid media manager, could give you much more insight on this than I could, but we're testing essentially a couple things. We're boosting the post, we're using the influencer's post in our ad account, so directly from the brand's page, and we're testing both. And at this moment, we're getting much better results than we are getting with directly from the ad account on the influencer's content. That's for sure. Now, where this trickles out is, let's say we want to chop up the content and we want to remake it, and we want to do that, and we want to cut that scene, mix and match different kind of cuts and beats and so forth, and it becomes hard to do that directly on the influencer's page. Not undoable, but we could definitely imagine a scenario where we're like, hey, influencer, could you post this to your social media, and then we could boost it and so forth. So we're playing with that. But yeah, definitely right now, very good feature that TikTok has enabled.
And I wonder if you're probably one of the best people to ask for this, but I guess there is a theory within the influencer community that once you kind of pop that paid partnership tag on your content, it automatically doesn't perform as well. Is that true, or is it just kind of a conspiracy theory?
In what sense? In the sense that
I guess I've seen some people say that once they on Instagram, let's say, you can add that little
Oh,
paid partnership tag, and they see less engagement than they would if they weren't using that. Is there any merit to those claims, or?
huh, that's interesting. Yeah, that could definitely make sense in a way that, just people interact less with it, right? Just because I don't think the algorithm would penalize you for that, although it might indirectly penalize you for that. But that's definitely a good question. I think I would definitely imagine that being true, just because less people engage because it's a paid partnership. I don't want to engage with a paid partnership. It feels like an ad, right? Um, so in that case, you get less engagement, and if you get less engagement, Instagram will kill the post faster. So that I can definitely see that being true across the board. Having said that, it allows you to boost a post with paid media. So that's the
Awesome.
that's the
And I guess, most of the time when we have guests on the podcast, we're kind of talking about the highs and the really great tips. But I want to know, what are some mistakes you've made when it comes to approaching an influencer marketing campaign in your many years of experience?
Yeah, so positioning is probably the biggest mistake. And look, like we try to not make it, but we still make it, and we can fix and course correct. But positioning, getting it right, making sure, it's just crazy, right? If you go into a campaign, right, give you an example of an ed tech platform, right, and you're given a $10 coupon on a $100 thing. That's not going to cut it. Like, that's not going to work. You need to think of your deal. You need to think how you position it. What's the USP? What are you putting forward? What are those things that the influencer needs to drive home? If your positioning sucks, your campaign won't drive the results you want. Period. And that's true for the content, that's true for the sales, that's true for everything, because the content is just positioning, like, in a visual format. So positioning is probably and it's probably the biggest mistake across marketing, period, to be honest, to put all those ad dollars behind an offer or that just doesn't resonate. And yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I guess on the other side of things, what have been some of your favorite influencer marketing campaigns to date? Whether that's ones you've worked on or ones that you've kind of seen in the media.
Yeah, I don't know. It's God, that's such a hard question. I feel like there are always like campaigns that win awards that are really cool. And on our side, like, some of the campaigns that I absolutely love working with is more like influencer types. It's just I love we have a client that's called Blue House Salmon. They sell salmon, right? And they're like environmentally friendly salmon. They grow them in land in the United States, so they're not farmed in seas, and it's like super ecological in many ways, and they're just an amazing brand to work with. And I'm just blown away. Like, this campaign just makes me, the creators, the content they create, the recipes, it's my favorite campaign by far. Like, I enjoy literally going through the content library and looking at the content. It blows me away about I guess it's that feeling of like, holy, there's a lot of good creators on social media, like a lot, and it just blows me away. Yeah, probably my favorite
Oh,
campaign.
nice. I often think that, we have clients that have ongoing campaigns where each month we kind of reach out to new influencers, and you just never run out. Like, it never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, it's
Just when you think you've found everyone you could possibly reach out to, there's more, and the content, it gets better, as you said.
Yeah, it always just gets better and better and better. It's amazing, and I think it's just democratized the content creation process. YouTube makes it so easy to learn to create good content. The equipment is cheaper. You're getting cell phones that are taking video to a level where, and it's just, I guess, all of that combined creates an army of creators that are ready to create amazing content. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, David, one question that I love to ask every guest that joins us on the podcast is, what are your predictions for the future of influencer marketing and influencer marketing trends?
Yeah, so look, like, so here's the thing. I think there's going to be a lot more customer influencers. So brands are going to work a lot more on their customers as an influencer pool. That's definitely something that I see coming up. I see, the rise of long-term collaborations where, you're going to be collaborating more and more with influencers. Couple ideas I've been having recently is just like, community marketing is being tossed around. I don't know if you've played around with Discord at all, but there are Discord groups out there and so much engagement in there. So I'm thinking like, what is the future of that? And then I think it's going to be much more community driven. I know the buzzword is being tossed around a lot, but I can definitely see that like being powerful stuff. What are your thoughts on the future of it?
Yeah, I think like community marketing and community management is a super interesting one, like kind of going into places like Reddit and understanding the Discord around your product, your industry is a super exciting concept. And yeah, I'm kind of interested to see where the content-based influencer marketing goes. I know you mentioned you're kind of steering away from it now, but I do think it's quite an interesting concept, and whether or not it's a bit redundant is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we still use it, right? It's just like we were like, hey, might as well get the distribution from it. It's like where we stand, unless we look for something very specific. Like we're like, hey, take these shots A, B, C, and then because we have clients that come to us and they have like these storyboards established, and they're like, hey, we want this. We want that, and then it's like, okay, influencer, like we need you to film this. It's almost like we're shooting essentially, and we're using Instagram or TikTok as our way to cast our shots.
Definitely. I'm interested also to see the shift away from your typical kind of influencer marketing, I guess, where you've got that product placement in an image, and move into more. I don't know if you saw a few years ago, like Taco Bell opened up their Taco Bell hotel and then invited like a bunch of influencers to that, and that was super interesting to watch vlogs of people
That's
staying
awesome.
there.
I love these stunts.
Yeah, definitely. It's super unique and it always stands out. So
yeah.
Right, well, before we wrap things up, David, it's time for our rapid recommendations segment, where we find out what our guests have been loving and what they can't live without. So I have 3 questions for you. The first is, what's one app or tool that you simply couldn't work without?
Oh, I use Todoist. Like I just looked at my tab, Todoist and Google Sheets. Probably these 2 things together are just, that's definitely it. I love Google Sheets.
Amazing. And who is one brand or persona that you think is getting social media right at the moment?
God, Spikeball. Do you know the game Spikeball? Yeah, they're crushing it. They're crushing it.
I know you're a massive...
If you're listening, Spikeball, like I would be, get on a call with me and we will talk about how we could work together. I love it. I play it a bunch and they're killing it on social media.
Yeah, I've heard you're a huge fan of Spikeballs, so good to know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's now it's getting cold here in Canada, unfortunately, so there are indoor kind of, we'll play other games for the winter.
And finally, what's one valuable resource, event, or group that you think our listeners should know about?
Oh, God. That's a tricky one. Let me check real quick. I do absolutely love this newsletter. What is it called? Stacked Marketer, I think. It's amazing. It's got tons of updates on the industry, what's going on. Yeah, very, very insightful.
Fantastic.
Keeps you on the edge of, it's crazy when you just see when you operate in this space, right? And then it's just like it changes so much. It changes so much. Like Snapchat releases new features, Instagram releases new features, TikTok releases new features. And truth be told, like leveraging these new features, like now TikTok has stories. We have to leverage that, we have to start doing it as soon as it's out, because that's when it has the most value. Then after that, it's overutilized and it's got diminishing return. So yeah, Stack Marketer, short answer, really good newsletter.
Thank you so much for sharing those with us. That's all we've got time for today, so thank you so much for joining me, David. If you guys enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or follow us if you're listening on Spotify. We would love to hear what you thought about today's interview, so make sure you reach out on social media and let us know what you thought. We've been Giraffe Social Media. You've been amazing. We'll see you next time.